This season on the art and science of complex sales, we're thrilled to present Tales from the Front Lines, a season developed for the leaders shaping the future of complex sales. We're bringing you straight into the action with the C-suite, VPs of sales, sales development experts, and top-performing sales execs who are redefining success in the B2B world. These are the trailblazers that are tackling tough sales cycles, coaching sales champions, and aligning teams to deliver exceptional results. So join us as we unpack the hard lessons, the breakthrough moments, and the invaluable insights from the best in the business. It's more than a podcast, it's a guide to growing revenue with confidence. So let's get started. Hey everybody, today we are diving into the evolving world of B2B sales, and we have Alan Maguire, founder and CEO of ESI. Alan and his team are on a mission to elevate the sales profession, and they are really working to change the professional development tendencies of the industry. So today we're talking around shifts in how many companies are investing in their sales talent today rather than in the years past. We're talking about paradigm shifts in the concept of training, and more talking about a continuing education and professional development model that more and more companies are looking to adopt. And this includes education, coaching, certification, and skills development. So get ready for a fascinating view from the front lines from Mr. Alan Maguire. Alan Maguire, welcome back to the show. How are you, my friend?
Really good. Thanks, Paul, and thanks for having me back.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about this season that we got going on, and let me just take you through a little bit of what we're trying to do, and we'll just dive in, have a good conversation. How about that sound?
What sounds very good to me.
Awesome. So the biggest thing is we're trying to bring to the forefront and bring to a broad audience across a lot of different industries and spectrums and areas is what is going on in the world of B2B sales, and not from an analysis perspective of a study or anything like that, but straight from the words and the mouths of the people that are doing it on a day-to-day basis and have a lot of roles that tie to sales. So you have a really cool role in the world of sales. So if you wouldn't mind starting us with kind of a reminder of that for everybody about where you operate currently, because you're both executing on a lot of high quality B2B sales, but you're also in the game of training. So and education around that. So do you mind kind of pointing us to where you operate in B2B sales currently?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks a million, Paul. And just by way of, it's really interesting actually that you use sort of training and education in the same sentence. I think that's going to be, those semantics are really central, I think, to the kind of things that we see in the industry all the time. But ESI provides kind of a career development solution for sales professionals and businesses who want to develop the skills, the softer skills that we know employers are looking for in commercial resources around the world. And I suppose critically give everybody a chance to get those skills recognized with a university grade portable credential that we hope is going to establish a global standard for professional selling today. So yeah, there's the skills development part of what we do, but the certification and the ability for people to get these sophisticated skills recognized formally in a way that they haven't been before is really central to our value proposition.
You're in the midst of selling a highly complex sale into L&D and sales organizations that are helping to develop their sales teams. I can't think of a better person right now to tell me what are some of the things that are going on out there. What are some of the things that you're seeing in the realm of B2B sales today that we need to bring up and focus on?
So I suppose let me start with kind of two halves of an answer. One half is to a certain extent going to echo what I said last time I was on, and the world is moving, but it hasn't moved fundamentally on, which is that sales is, for us, the conversation is around talent and talent strategy and the extent to which organizations are properly investing in their commercial talent in the same way that they would invest in any other function in the business. And I think that part of the conversation lends itself to that really interesting intro you had where you use the words training and education in the same sentence. And I actually, we feel that those two words are loaded in terms of connotation in the industry, and I'll come back to that. And that's really generic in general, and we are, while we're very focused on B2B sales skills, we are lucky enough to be sector agnostic. If your organization sells, solution something complex. You talked about a complex B2B sales process. Typically, our curriculum will be developing the skills that you're looking for. We focus on more complex sales skills than less complex sales skills. So we do stretch beyond technology. We stretch into any organization or industry that sells complex solutions. That's our wheelhouse. I think more recently, and this has been fascinating to watch evolve, if we focus a little bit on the tech world and specifically the SaaS tech world, we found it fascinating to watch how fascinating, and I mean in a neutral way, not in a positive way, in the bloodbath that SaaS has experienced in the last kind of 2 years, 18 months, how the perception has shifted from sales being easy, in inverted commas, hey, actually, this thing is quite hard and actually requires people with quite a degree of complex and sophisticated skills. And to a certain extent, is catching up with the rest of the world. We would have sold into industries that would regard sales as being hard all the time. SaaS had a golden period, where you kind of threw money at lead gen and threw money at SDRs and BDRs and didn't have to worry too much about how capable they were because the numbers kind of tumbled in. And that world's changed significantly. And we're seeing in the SaaS world in particular, a greater focus on people and skills and talent, and whether they are equipped with the skills they need to perform consistently at a level of high performance. And that's very relevant to what we try and do.
That's a massive shift in the SaaS world. That's not something that's small, having lived in that for a long time. What's driving that? Like, what are you seeing that's really the core drivers of that shift in thinking?
I mean, this is going to be a very personal view. I haven't kind of analyzed the debate in any forensic way.
Wait a second. Stop. Yeah, we're going to have to stop the podcast altogether because you're giving it. It's not peer reviewed. It's not studied. It's everybody. When Alan says he's given a personal view, it's worth listening to. You don't need to qualify anything there. Your personal view is what I'm looking for.
I appreciate that, Paul. Okay, so I think we see it all really being umbilically connected to the shortage of capital. And I think that for a long, long time, SaaS businesses in particular, in a world where capital was cheap in relative terms, obviously it was always expensive in equity terms, but when capital was relatively cheap and available and pretty easy to get a hold of, you could kind of throw money at your sales operation and not worry too much about what was going on under the bonnet. And, if it's working, throw more money at it. If it's not working, well, fire them and just throw more people at it. And whether we're making any money or not doesn't really matter. We're just growing and growing and growing at all costs. So more money, more leads into it, and those leads will convert to given our metrics, and then out will come sales at the other end, with no real worry about efficiency or, dare I say, profitability or high performance or return on investment in that sales talent. And I think the consequence of that, when that changed, when capital became harder to get, when runway became an issue in a way that it wasn't before, companies had to look at what they were investing in commercial operations and perhaps rebalance that away from tech for tech's sake and kind of, pretty commoditized kind of marketing lead generation activities, and focus a little bit more on, well, what are our people doing with all these assets we're giving them, whether it be technology or whether it be leads, and how capable are they at a skills level of converting those, and move it away from being a numbers and a quantitative game into being a qualitative game. Because businesses just couldn't rely on the capital being there to just keep throwing money at the bottom. And that's kind of where we think all this began. And thankfully, again, in our world, we wouldn't have had a massive kind of SaaS client base. We developed generic sales skills. So we're lucky enough to be able to sell cross-industry. So in that way, we think SaaS is catching up with the rest of the real world to a certain extent when it comes to sales talent, as opposed to going through some sort of kind of revolution on their own that nobody else recognizes. There's a bit of a feeling of, oh, come on in, the water's warm. Sales is hard. It's not as easy as throwing money at it, and you have to think about these kind of things.
Well, does that tie together with those two terms, that education and training that you were talking about earlier, and kind of your view of that? So catching up, how does that happen, and where are people really focusing their dollars in terms of catching up?
So the really strange thing we see, Paul, and this to a certain extent hasn't changed, is that, and this is where if we elevate it, well, I'll come back to the words training and education in a second, but if we come back for a second to the elevation of this conversation into something closer to talent strategy than sales training. And there's two ends of a spectrum there. If we think about it at a strategic talent level, what we see organizations do really well and have kind of consistently seen them do really well for a long time is identify the skills they want their salespeople to have. So if you take a competency map or a job spec, candidly, or if you talk to talent and sales leaders tell us about the kind of people you want in your sales team or sales force, they're typically very educated and they're very articulate about expressing that they kind of want superhuman people with an extraordinary set of very, very complex and sophisticated skills. And that's kind of great. So we've got employers around the world who recognize that, and that's music to our ears. But however, it's what happens after that that's a bit of a problem. So they kind of codify and recognize we want all these magicians who can come in with these superpowered skills. But when they can't find them, which is no surprise to us because of a shortage of kind of suitably skilled talent out there, they really struggle either to hire to those competencies, or when they hire people without those competencies, they really struggle to develop them. And so our kind of world is very much about bridging that gap between the fact that you recognize, you've identified, you've codified the kinds of people you want to have in your commercial teams. Do you have them or not? Typically the answer is no. Okay, well now what are you going to do? And trying to center the conversation around that. And to go back to the word training and education, I think that in our experience, companies historically just thought, well, if I've got a sales gap or a skills gap or typically a knowledge gap in my sales force, I will throw training at them. And that'll be enough. And the training I'll throw at them will probably be something along the lines of product training or pricing training or something technical or hard. And in our world, hard skills like that. Whereas if they go back to ground zero and the skills they're hiring for, that they are rarely hiring for people who know their product. They're hiring for a much more complex set of skills. And that's where the gap is. And you can't fix that what we call higher order cognitive skills gap. You can't fix that gap and develop those skills with traditional training. Those skills are developed best over time and best through application on the job. And therefore, we regard that journey as much more of a traditional education journey than a training journey. Professionals in other disciplines, HR professionals, accountants, lawyers, doctors, don't say they go to training. They say they go to school. They regard themselves as being educated in their professional discipline. And we believe that's a gap in the world of sales. And there's no reason why sales professionals, particularly when the world has identified what skills they want their salespeople to have, there's no reason those people shouldn't be entitled to the same quality and education, the same quality of education and process of education that other highly skilled professions go through.
Yeah, I just thought of something. You're going to have to help me connect the dots on this, but if I go back to my education days, I was fortunate enough to be able to teach for a while at University of Arizona. It was a lot of fun. I loved it, right? And truly, we're focusing on education and working it. And there was that combination that I don't think you get a ton. I noticed as soon as I moved into the business world that specifically in sales, that I didn't get a ton of exposure to, which is the application of information instead of just the giving of information. And what I mean by that is I could teach a class, I would bring the class, we'd have a project, that project that would then be graded, but I could also coach them and would effectively do so. They would stop in office hours and they would think about problems and how to solve them and which way and that type of stuff and so I was given information, coaching, and application and helping them with the application of knowledge in a safe space where they could work it. For the most part, that disappeared upon entry into the business world, right? It was instead of an application in a safe space, it was application on the job. Instead of think through how you do it, it's why aren't you doing this? So when you're approaching this idea from an education, what do you mean by that? Do you mean all those aspects? Do you mean coaching, acquisition of knowledge? Like, what are the components that go into that?
Yeah, so I'll give you, and this again is where we can link back to the bit that employers do really well, which is kind of codifying these things, and we've developed a curriculum around the skills we know employers want, and they are softer skills. So, to name but a few, employers want people to be solving problems. They want them to be creative. They want them to be confident, and a whole long list of other things. So, what you'll notice about that, Paul, is those skills aren't about things that you know. And in fact, if you look at the typical sales job spec, An employer rarely expects a salesperson to know much, and yet training typically teaches knowledge. Assessment of training, if it's based on some sort of kind of quiz or something kind of one-dimensional like that, is putting people through a knowledge experience. Product training is about knowledge. It's about knowing a product, and I can test what you know. But actually, if you go back to that kind of that holy grail, the job spec, the employer isn't looking for their, and I'm oversimplifying here, but the employer typically isn't looking for people to know a huge amount. They're looking for them to act a particular way, to behave in particular ways, and most important, to think in a particular way. And you can't teach that the same way you teach knowledge. That skill and that behavioral change can only be developed over time, and using a whole range of, and you've been a teacher, Paul, so you'll get this, a whole range of learning modalities. It's not about go and learn this and then go and know it and then walk off into the sunset. You've got to think about it and you've got to do it. And then you've got to think about it after you've done it and see, did I get a better business result because of that? And so we like to think that our solution can be a big part of that. It's a purely digital solution. It is best delivered when supported by coaching, when it's best delivered when supported by what we might call good line management, good in peer-to-peer learning infrastructure that can just happen in the regular flow of work. So that's what we mean by education. It is about skills and behavior. It's not about knowledge. And traditional sales training has typically been about knowledge. I'm going to teach you a process that you can know and remember. But that's no good if you don't apply it. And more importantly, the most important thing for us is that there's no right answer in sales. And you'll know this better than anyone. There actually are very few homogenous processes or tasks that you can just repeat ad nauseum. The trick is working out which bit of which process is going to work for this particular sales journey I'm on. And if it's working, I go do more of it. And if it's not, I go do something else. But I'm kind of constantly analyzing and assessing that. And that's what we mean by behavioral change and skills development. And we don't think traditional training can do that. It's not a knowledge-based program, it's a skills-based program. And coaching is central to that. We like to think we can be the asynchronous part of a really important coaching program. We can get people doing things a self-determined way, but they still need support. They need operational support. They need line management support, and they probably need what one might call professional coaching around that.
There's an interesting phenomenon that I've seen happen in the sales world. There's an explosion of the term coaching, right? And it's not just because we've released a platform that helps people do really, if people want to embark on a systematic coaching mission for their team, like we play really well in that with our platform. But there is a lot of definitions that float around that. There's a lot of definitions that when you say in the sales circles, you talk about training, coaching, process, in-field role plays, all this stuff. And you bring in this word education. I think I actually love that word when we just talk about what it means to be, if we really are talking about behavior change and education, what it really means to embrace that. And you're telling me that people are what I'm hearing you say is that people are making a shift. So what is happening right now is people are truly in market making a shift to this idea of we truly need, this is actually a harder job. Capital is drying up. It's harder to sell. Pipelines are tighter. We got to get better. But to investing in that actual education and the components of what they need to bring to a sales team to get continually better. Is that what I'm hearing you say, or am I just filling in blanks incorrectly?
I think in our experience, you've got like in any other context, any other scenario, you've got rapid adopters of that, and people who buy into it and quite literally buy into it and have internalized the investment bit. I think you've got those people who have to process the fact that this does come with an investment requirement. It doesn't happen overnight, and we'll come back to that from a coaching perspective in a second. And then you've got those who just want sales fixed. It must be easy. I've got a big problem, but it can't be hard to fix because it's a pretty easy job that everybody else does. I'm not going to do it myself, and surely those dullards in the sales team can just fix it. And they're a long way from moving on, So I think the world is moving, and there are different organizations, but the big journey they I think have to go on, and it's something you see repeated all the time, is that they still think, organizations still are at risk of thinking that a traditional sales training course is going to fix it. I'm not saying a traditional sales training course won't be of benefit, although there's a school of thought out there that says it just won't and it won't work. But it certainly isn't going to fix the kind of gaps that we see in our customers all over the world all the time. And so at some point, there's a Rubicon that one has to cross where one goes, I get this and I need to invest in fixing it, because there's not a quick win or a magic fix. And coaching is a little bit like that. I mean, again, people will embark on coaching sessions for 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 12 weeks, and really, no, coaching is something that just has to happen all the time. The analogy, I'm a very keen sportsman, what I use all the time is that Tiger Woods, when he was the best golfer in the world by a mile, still had a coach, and it never stopped. He never kind of said, I have this licked and I don't need a coach anymore. So coaching is kind of an ongoing process, and organizations have to internalize how they're going to facilitate that. We believe we're going to be a central part of that process, but whether it's line management, whether it's teaching and developing them to be coaches of their salespeople, whether it's external support, whether it's an infrastructure around that, your new solution. But they do need to understand it's not a magic wand. You can't just flick a switch and say my people are now coached. The world doesn't work like that. But the part of the journey we try to bring people on is they would not take that view of any other discipline. You don't flick a switch for an accountant. You don't send a bookkeeper to an accountancy course on Monday afternoon in a hotel and then expect them to go back on Tuesday as an accountant. Yeah. You don't send a lawyer to a training course on Monday afternoon and expect them to go back as a lawyer. So why do you do that with your salespeople and expect to fix a problem that you clearly you've internalized?
Would you agree? I'm seeing also a number of things come up. There's this idea, and I just want to get your opinion on this. I hear it's almost an even split, and I may be seeing this wrong, but I hear half the market saying this, talking about like you are, like, okay, it's almost back to the beginning. It's almost looking at an IBM model again and saying, hey, you know what, I truly need to do this type of in-depth training coaching, looking for long-term reps to continually drive revenue, keep them in, instead of making this instead of having it be a factory, right? Instead of just saying I can plug anybody and anybody into any part of the line and have them work just because I give them the right words and the right system. So there's half of the market that's looking at it like that. And then there's another half that I see that is very much looking at AI and the ability to replace those pieces of the, may I say, that assembly line, and just where AI can do the replacement of those pieces in the assembly line. And then I can have just fewer people that are better at fewer things. Do you see both those things out in the market like I do? Am I seeing that the wrong way, or is there a place in the middle that you see being propped up?
Yeah, so that's the whole podcast series. In a series, never mind episode, and never mind part of an episode. Well, so we could go a long time onto that. Let me again go kind of to 50,000 feet first of all. For me, one of the curiosities about, and I don't want to get hung up the SaaS world because we do deal with clients in lots of different sectors, but one of the curiosities, I think, in the last 10 to 15 years in SaaS in particular, but is the fact that there still isn't a clear demarcation or understanding out there about what sales is and what marketing is. And I think there's the speed at which the world evolved in the last 10 to 15 years ended up in a lexicon where a lot of people carried sales titles, but really were doing what a dinosaur like me would call a marketing role, or a lead generation role, or a lead nurturing role. And I'm not saying that's not a critical part of the end-to-end sales process, but they weren't carrying a quota, and I'm talking about a dollar quota, not a meeting quota. And in our very simplistic world at ESI, if you're kind of not carrying a quota, you're not a salesperson. And we get quite clinical about that in terms of defining what sales is. It's a long-winded way of saying that I think that when people talk about AI and sales, a lot of the time, I think they're living in that kind of vague world where what we might call marketing, they are thinking of as sales. And I think there's, at the top of the funnel in B2B, at the first part of the process, where that first part is 25% or 30% or 50%, I don't know what it is. But there's no doubt that there is a part of the client journey during which they don't need to engage with a human being, and they need information. They need facts. Brings us back to knowledge versus skills. And I think there's a compelling argument. I don't think it's there yet, but there's a compelling argument to say that AI, within a couple of years, will be able to do dramatic, extraordinary things for that part of the process. So to the extent that humans are involved in the marketing or lead gen or top of the funnel part of the sales process, I think AI, could be quite revolutionary. But if we think about the buyer for a second, I'm talking B2B buyer only, and we're only interested in B2B from our business point of view. I'm struggling to see a world when I look at how businesses buy and procure and the barriers they put on placing an order or investing in anything. I'm struggling to see how, for most B2B solutions, the buyer or the buyers are going to be comfortable buying something without engaging with a human being. I'm really struggling to see that. The sales world or the employer, the sales, the vendor will like to kind of take out an eraser and rub out their sales team and hope AI can fix it all. But I'm not sure the buyer does. And so therefore, I still think that at the sharper end, and whether that's the last 50% or 75% or 25%, whatever the buyer wants to get involved with a human being, you're going to need highly skilled human beings to engage with them. And ironically enough, it's the inversion of where people think AI can work. Because if the buyer's gotten all their information and facts from AI, and they've kind of done 75% of their research or whatever, and now they've chosen, I need to engage with a human being from vendor A, vendor B, and vendor C to find out what solution I need, they don't need facts about product. They are looking for an experience. They are looking not necessarily to be sold to, but they're looking for guidance and help to make the best purchasing decision for their business. And I don't see AI being able to do that for a long, 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 long time. So yes, there may be efficiencies to be gained with AI at what we might call the top of the funnel or the marketing end of the funnel, to the extent to which you can draw a thick line between them. But as long as buyers want to engage with human beings, you're going to need humans selling, and you're going to need really, really highly skilled humans selling. There aren't enough of them out there in the marketplace right now, and employers are probably feeling that. They're probably experiencing it, but they really need to internalize that and do something about it.
Yeah, and I would even, I'm seeing a shift, which is an interesting one. It is, for much of the world, it's not even a shift. It's just a resumption of normal activity, but a shift back to the in-person, the ability to the top of the funnel in person, the very top. So I think we're going to also see an explosion of those soft skills necessary, that simple in-person ability to communicate effectively with people on an ongoing basis. I think more shows, more speaking, that type of stuff, because people do get so inundated with the digital now, and it's so much easier to get inundated with the digital, but to not trust much of it.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, it is ironic that the people championing AI as being this revolution is going to. I won't speak for how long you've been around, Paul, but I've been around for the death of the salesperson for a long, long time. For every decade, there's a new technology that's going to erase the need for salespeople. And so many times we've written blog posts about the LinkedIn posts that say, I'll never hire another salesperson because I don't need them anymore. And yet the kind of circle comes back to us. But it seems kind of ironic that people championing AI as being the panacea for all these ills. AI could not have landed into the sales industry at one could argue, a worse time. When digital marketing and cadence and automation have created a tidal wave of noise and loud noise, ineffective noise, and poor results. And from what I can see, all AI can do is kind of do more of that and not do it any better, but if anything, potentially do it worse. And I think the procurement world is already voting to a certain extent with its feet, quite literally in the context of events. But I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. And I think organizations are hopefully internalizing that, and that will require better skills too. I mean, the extent to which you could put a human being in front of a piece of software and just get them to plan how they were going to bombard people with emails, and just kind of go for a coffee and just bombard people with emails with no intelligence behind it. I'm not sure it was ever going to work, but the extent to which it ever did, I think those days are long over. So you're either replacing that with smarter technology and efficient technology, or as you say, no, actually, we have to replace it with human beings who can do this. Again, it'll be a quality over quantity game. So I couldn't agree more.
So it all goes back to, and to go back to the original thesis of the conversation, I think it all goes back to what we're seeing. Well, from your perspective, what you're seeing really in market is this shift away from spot training as at least in the early adopters, this shift away from spot training as a hope and pray strategy into, no, we actually need to invest in, we may have fewer salespeople. We may be outsourcing fewer roles, but those salespeople we need to have, we need to invest in the quality of the skills that we want, not just the product knowledge, but the skills that we want, the coaching, the education, the everything around that. Along with that, I would assume, and this is an assumption, and I'm wondering if you see that, is if you're going to invest in that, the employee retention strategy has to be really, really, really high. If you're investing in people, in talent as a strategy for differentiation, investing in that ability to retain them on an ongoing basis. And, for a salesperson, I think that's pretty easy. It's giving them more opportunity to sell more often. But do you see that trickling in, or are you hearing that trickling in at any point at this point?
Well, it's kind of central to the conversations we have, because we do try if we can, and if our buyers will let us make this a strategic talent conversation. And you've got a kind of vicious circle there. So on the one hand, Paul, you've got the dividend of investing in salespeople means that you're going to, almost by definition, and we have proven data on this, where ESI is deployed, you reduce staff turnover. So that's really important. So that's the kind of a dividend before you even get to skills development, a behavioral change. You've moved the needle if you're not losing people. And remember as well that when you invest in people and you keep people, you're typically keeping your better people. You're not, the people that you're losing if you don't invest in their development are typically your better people, because your better people are the ones who want to get developed. So you've got a double dividend there. But the flip side of that is that if you don't invest and you're just looking at this rotating door of people, we bring our clients back to, and they've a lived experience of this. That is that there is a shortage of suitably skilled people out there. If you go back to the last, 5 people you hired, 10 people you hired, did they come to you with the requisite skills that you've identified in your job spec? And the answer is going to be a resounding no, they didn't, because they're just not out there. If your choice is, well, they're not delivering, so I'm going to turn them over, voluntarily or involuntarily, what makes you think you're going to get better people when you go back to the market? That just simply doesn't add up. You got those people; they were the best people you could get 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, 12 months ago. So you're arguably going to go back to market and get lesser skilled people because you hired the ones with the best skills last time. So what makes you think you're going to fix the problem by doing that? And so you've got the cost of that turnover, but you've got the ever decreasing circles of the pool of talent that you're going to hire from. So it's no-brainer sense for you and I. Our job, of course, is in the businesses we're in, is to convince employers of that. We think they're getting there. And our reference point all the time is how they treat the rest of the functions in the business. And we're not looking for exceptional treatment for salespeople here. We're not looking for exceptional investment in their skills development. We're looking for parity. And sales training is not necessarily on par with how they invest in the retention and development of all their other functions in the business. And yet salespeople are the most important resource, and they'd be the first to admit that.
What is the word that you recommend? Is it continuing education? Is it transformation? Is there one word that sums up this approach that you see organization? Is it systematic training? And I'm not going to fill in the blanks. Is there one word that you use there?
So I'll tell you, I'm going to give you 3. And the interesting thing is we don't have to make them up, because to go back to my last point, they are in existence for every professional function in a business. And those 3 words are continual professional development. And it doesn't have to be any more kind of original or groundbreaking or visionary than that. Mm-hmm. And the irony is that's exactly what organizations offer their professions. Now, most of their professions are bringing with them an industrial strength professional credential in some shape or form, whether it's in we always default to kind of talent or law or accountancy or marketing or any other business function that's out there. But look at how they look after developers and coders. I mean, there's constant professional development there. our thesis really is, well, first of all, it would be helpful if salespeople could get a university grade baseline credential, and that's where we come in. But also we can offer them kind of, a stackable credential model that enables them to do that over an extended period of time that fits with the cadence of their life and the cadence of the peaks and troughs of their sales year. And so it isn't about going to a course on Monday and coming back fixed. It's about enabling somebody to develop all the time. And whether it's for this role where they've got a skills gap, or beginning to develop the skills that the organization's identified they'll need for the next step in their career. And that's not inventing something brand new. That's something the organization already does for everybody else.
Thank you so much, Alan. This has been a fantastic discussion. And one of the things I want to make sure I give you time to do is, how do people get in touch with you if they're interested in some of the concepts you're talking through and really want to just chat them through?
Best thing, certainly, to talk to me personally is to get me at my email address, which is amaguire@esinstitute.com. And that will give away our website, www.esinstitute.com. You'll find out a lot more about what we do for individuals and professional career development, and for employers and partners as well. Awesome. And thank you. I truly appreciate it. You're always bringing knowledge on this. And it is coming directly from the front lines, which is fascinating to me, because you're selling this, you're actively developing and selling into organizations that are trying to actively develop and sell and create their people loop. So can't get a better source for this. So truly appreciate it. Anything you want to end the episode on? No, really appreciate you having me back, Paul, and I would love to do it again sometime. Fantastic. We'll make it a date. And yeah, we should do it within the next 6 months to a year. We'll get an update on where this is going, because I think it really is important it's important for the whole profession, right? And we're trying to level up the game and understand what's going on out there. And also that continual ed, instead of making it pieces parts, there are ways to drive that more effectively for everybody. So it's good stuff, man. Good stuff. All right. Hey, everybody, signing out from the Art and Science of Sales. Have an amazing day. Keep shining bright. Please do reach out to Alan if you get a chance. And reach out to me if you have any questions, comments, or feedback. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and all of that good stuff. And have an amazing, amazing day. Hey, y'all. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Art and Science of Complex Sales. I hope today's conversation provided you with some valuable insights and some practical ideas to help you and your team succeed in this complex world today. This podcast is brought to you by Membrain.com. Membrain is the B2B growth platform for CEOs, sales leaders, and sales executives committed to sustainable growth and change. Membrain equips your team with the methodology, the process, the people, and the tools to continually improve and coach results. More than a CRM, it's designed to help your team execute with confidence, smash goals, and overall up their sales game. So if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, share it with your network, and your support really helps us bring more valuable insights from the best of the business straight to you. We'll see you next time for another episode of the Art and Science of Complex Sales. And until then, as always, keep shining bright.